mode.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gail Warren with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar hosted by the Building America program. We are excited to have Danny Parker, Alea German, and Brennan join us today to tell you about successful deep energy retrofit projects across the country. The presentations will focus on technical strategies, modeled and actual performance results, and project costs. Before we begin, I'll quickly go over some of the webinar features. For audio, you have two options. You may either listen through your computer or telephone. If you choose to listen through your computer, please select the mic and speakers option in the audio pane. By doing so, we will eliminate the possibility of feedback and echo. If you select the telephone option, a box on the right side will display the telephone number and audio pin you should use to dial in. Panelists, we ask that you please mute your audio device while you are not presenting. If you have technical difficulties with the webinar, you may contact the GoToWebinars help desk at 888-259-3826 for assistance. If you would like to ask a question, please use the questions pane to type in your question. If you are having difficulty viewing the materials through the webinar portal, you may find PDF copies of the presentations at the website listed here, and you may follow along as our speakers present. Today's webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the DOE YouTube channel within a few weeks. We have an exciting agenda prepared for you today that will focus on Building America deep energy retrofit projects across the country that are meeting with technical and market success. Before our speakers begin, I will provide a short overview of the Building America program. Following the presentations, we will have a question and answer session, closing remarks, and a brief survey. The U.S. Department of Energy's Building America program has been a source of innovations in residential building energy performance, durability, quality, affordability, and comfort for nearly 20 years. This world-class research program partners with industry to bring cutting-edge innovations and resources to market. Building America is supported by 10 industry research teams and 4 national labs. Each of these teams and labs partner with dozens of industry professionals, including builders, remodelers, manufacturers, and utilities. The best and the brightest in the residential buildings industry can be found here. Building America uses applied research to deliver building science solutions using a 4-step framework. These innovative solutions are tested in homes to develop proven case studies of success the market can point to. Building America provides the tools the building industry needs to ensure the innovations are applied correctly, always keeping an eye on energy performance, durability, quality, and affordability. The final step, infrastructure development, is the conduit to getting innovations to the marketplace. Building America research focuses on how the components of new and existing homes work together through systems integration. As the market changes and evolves, so has the direction of our research in order to add value and drive changes in performance across the residential building industry. In addition to technical challenges we have been addressing for decades, there is also a need to understand market transformation issues such as valuation of energy efficiency to our portfolio. In the nearly 20 years of Building America research, we have spearheaded combining ultra-high efficiency with high performance in both new and existing homes, and we are consistently achieving this challenging task. For example, in 1995, a typical home used 3 times more energy per square foot compared to today, and indoor air quality, comfort, and durability problems were common. Today, a home built to DOE Zero Energy Ready home specifications uses less than half the energy, costs less to own, and is more comfortable, healthy, and durable. By 2030, Building America will demonstrate that new and existing homes can produce more energy than they use. Next slide. Do you want to know more about these proven innovations born out of world-class research? The Building America Solutions Center is your one-stop source for expert information on hundreds of high-performance construction topics, including air sealing and insulation, HVAC components, windows, indoor air quality, and much more. You can find it by the URL on your screen or by searching on Building America Solutions Center. And now, on to today's presentation. The topic today is who's successfully doing deep energy retrofits. The goal of this webinar is to inform you about real-world deep energy retrofit projects across the country that are meeting with technical and market success. If you would like more information about any of these efforts, or if you are interested in collaborating, please feel free to contact any of our presenters. Our first speaker today is Danny Parker. Danny is a principal research scientist at the Florida Solar Energy Center, where he collects and analyzes data to help reduce building energy use. Danny will discuss a project of 60 all-electric single-family homes that are receiving phased energy-saving retrofits in Florida. Next up is Alea German. Alea is a senior engineer at Davis Energy Group, where she focuses on technology assessment and whole building energy use optimization using a variety of building modeling programs. Alea will describe results from 3 case studies of retrofit projects in both marine and hot-dry climates with moderate space conditioning loads. Finally, we will hear from Brennan, who is a senior research associate at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, where he studies deep retrofits, zero net energy homes, ventilation, and indoor air quality. And with that, I'd like to welcome Alea to start the presentation.
Thanks, Gail. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today. Next slide. I'll go over a little bit of background, then I'll move right into results from 3 retrofits in California. Next slide. So with over 60 million homes in the United States that are 30 years old or older, there's a really large opportunity here. A lot of these buildings are high energy users, and that represents a great potential for energy savings. At the same time, a lot of these homes don't afford a lot of comfort to these occupants, and so providing more comfortable, durable, and healthy, long-living homes is another great potential. Next slide. So this first retrofit is the Sonoma Passive House. It was the first certified passive house in California and the first passive house retrofit in the United States. It was completed in 2010 by Passive Works and builder Rick Milburn, and this was in the marine climate of Sonoma, California. So originally there was a relatively unfunctional floor plan. There's actually 2 structures originally on site, and those were connected together by an enclosed breezeway, which increased the conditioned floor area a little bit. And being that this was driven by passive house program, the retrofit including moving from relatively minimally insulated assemblies to high R-value assemblies, as well as a gas combined hydronic heating system, no cooling, to a mini split for cooling, backup space heating, and then solar thermal for space heating and DHW. Next slide. So we do not have any pre-retrofit monitored data for this project, but after 12 months of monitoring post-retrofit, you can see on the graph on the right that we were able to see that total energy use on a source basis was 22% lower than the passive house target. Space conditioning, that was ventilation, which was done with an ERV, and then both the mini split and then the solar thermal contributed about 1/3 of total source energy, and a big chunk of that 61%, is appliances, lighting, and plug loads. There were a couple high-cost items here. The windows were triple pane imported from Germany. at $90,000. The lighting was certainly a high-end design, and that contributed a lot to that $62K. And the walls with 4 inches of exterior foam using the existing 2x4 studs came in number 3 at $39. Next slide. So lessons learned from this, certainly some cost reduction lessons. The builder has since moved towards double stud walls, and this has allowed him to utilize existing experience of a lot of the trades rather than go through a lot of training and some of the difficulties of attaching 4 inches of foam exterior insulation. With air sealing, it was certainly a challenge getting the trades up to speed on sealing, and as well just the entire project team, and he was able to take certain lessons learned, identified products that he preferred, and a number of things to move on to future projects. Solar thermal in general was also a high-cost item, particularly in California. We have low DHW loads, we have low space heating loads, and the integration of this into space heating was just not cost-effective with the low loads. And from an energy standpoint, moving from triple pane to dual pane windows is pretty justified. At the same time, I'll say that the builder felt that this addition was really highly valued by the homeowner, and he wasn't able to find comparable performing windows, not just in regards to thermal performance, but also just on sealing and other functionalities, and he continues to recommend them. So one other little tidbit is that initially the mini split was located in an enclosed small room, and the thought was that the tight home distribution will just happen naturally, and this did not occur. The mini split had to be moved to a more central location, and this did improve the distribution some. Next slide. The Stockton hot dry retrofit is a retrofit that was done in 2011 in the hot dry climate of Stockton, California, and it was done by Green Home Solutions, a contractor there. And the homeowners are really motivated to reduce their utility bills and improve comfort in their home. Green Home Solutions was marketing a standard retrofit package in the Stockton area to homeowners, which included air sealing, attic insulation, duct sealing or duct replacement, and they pushed this from their standard package to a deeper retrofit design in this project, and that included adding floor insulation, new windows, new HVAC, and new tankless water heater. Next slide. So these results are normalized to TMY3 weather data, and we're seeing 22% source energy savings, along with about $1,000 annual utility cost savings. So we also looked at annual cash flow analysis, both of the deep retrofit package, which is what was conducted at this house, and then the space package, which is the standard package I mentioned. And in both cases, this annual cost, which is a financed cost of the retrofit, was not completely offset by the annual utility savings. In both cases, there was a negative annual cash flow, demonstrating some of the difficulties of making retrofits cost-effective. Next slide. So that was one of the lessons learned from this, is that cost-effectiveness remains a challenge, although there are many other motivators for retrofits. The standard package was found to be more cost-effective than the deeper retrofit, but it still was not cost-effective over the term of the financing. And a couple of the most costly items were these window upgrades and a tankless water heater. Another lesson learned was that energy, in this case, the energy model was not a good predictor of savings, and energy savings were overestimated by about 100%. Next slide. The Sunnyvale Deep Retrofit is another passive house design retrofit, although it wasn't certified passive house, in the marine climate of Sunnyvale, California. And this was completed in 2013 by One Sky Homes and builder Alan Gilliland. And a big motivation for this retrofit was increasing comfort of the home. The retrofit scope included going from practically uninsulated assemblies to higher value assemblies on the wall, floor, and the roof. There was an old existing gas furnace, no cooling again, and they moved to a mini split system with a unique distribution system that we'll talk about in a little bit. Next slide. So again, these savings are normalized to TMY3 weather, and you see there's a slight increase in electricity use. That's because we added cooling, then we also switched heating from gas to electricity, but pretty substantial gas savings at about 500 therms. And this resulted in a roughly 40% source energy savings and $500 annual savings on utility bills. Again, this wasn't enough to completely offset the costs of the retrofit. So in our pie chart, we see in this case, HVAC energy uses are roughly 20%, and the biggest chunk there is appliances at 40%, and then lighting and plugs at 23%. Next slide. So the distribution, the heating, cooling, and distribution design here was one mini split indoor unit that was supplying directly to a great room. As well, there's an HRV that is supplying directly to this great room. And then there's an efficient fan that exhausts air from this great room and via a relatively compact duct system delivers that air to three different rooms. So on the left here, this graph is showing on a typical summer day a temperature over the course of a day in these four rooms, and you can see that all four temperatures are on average, within a couple of degrees. There is a bump up in the afternoon, which may be from cooking or occupants getting home. We also, on a seasonal basis, we did a comparison to ACA Manual RS, which is a comfort standard, and found that in most cases, generally the temperature conditions in the house complied with the standard. There were a few instances, and about 2% of the total time during cooling and a little bit more during the heating season, that the temperature conditions were outside of the range recommended by the standards. But reported by the builder, there's about $3,500 first cost savings compared to standard split heat pump with standard ductwork. Next slide. So generally speaking, the mini split with this distribution strategy is a cost-effective means of providing comfort. Based on some of the limitations of our monitoring, we did not look at, for example, stratifications within rooms, and so there's some opportunity for further work there. And this certainly isn't going to be appropriate for large homes or homes with a layout that really isn't conducive to this design. Again, the energy model really over-predicted the savings in this case, and also in the post-retrofit case, we've seen this in a number of different homes now in mild climates and high-performance homes. The models really over-predict cooling and under-predict heating, and this possibly could be an over-accounting of internal gains. Next slide. So kind of tying all this together, cost-effectiveness remains to be a challenge. Costs need to come down some more. We need to continue to identify cost-saving strategies for retrofits, or maybe energy needs to be valued more highly. However, there are important non-energy benefits of comfort and health and durability, and these can be very important motivators for homeowners, and particularly early adopters, who some other work has recommended those being a very good target at this point in time for retrofits. So ongoing development of case studies like these and the others that we're going to hear about today are really important to provide examples of the benefits of retrofits and provide lessons learned. Next slide. And that is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alea. And next up is Danny Parker.
Danny, it looks like you're on mute. I think you need to unmute your line.
Thank you, Gail. I'm sorry. I'm going to present to you today results from a project where we've been monitoring 60 houses in Florida in detail and then trying to perform some retrofits on these houses and then trying to understand what we're seeing in terms of the energy savings and what the opportunities might be. Next slide, please. So the houses are all in the state of Florida, and they're concentrated for convenience, not too far from where we're located here in the Central Florida area. It's a cooperative project between the U.S. DOE and the largest utility in the state, Florida Power and Light, and the houses have been metered for about 2 years now, and they're extensively measured. And then the idea in the project was that we would perform audits of each house, that is, learn exactly what we're up against, and also shallow retrofits at the same time, which are easy to do, pass-through things at once. And we would also collect utility records and then see exactly what differences those shallow retrofits made. Then after we got the information, we would perform deeper retrofits in 10 of the houses and then collect data. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, 60 houses. I'm going to show some data for the monitoring from January through July 2013. We're picking up 18 channels, and in my career, this is the most detailed metering I've ever seen. We're measuring all the way down to the main television, also interior temperature and relative humidity, and picking up hourly data. And then we're looking at this for all these houses and then we set up a website so that it's possible to look at what's going on daily or weekly or over a long period of time with the homes to try to understand exactly where the energy loads are coming from and what one might do about them. Next slide, please. So this just shows the richness of the data. This is the average. In the upper left is the average of the whole building power, and these are all electric houses, from January 1st through July 16th, 2013. So you're seeing half the year. And it's showing the average for all 60 homes rather than the individual homes. And so you're seeing, well, you know, it's doing what you'd expect. The loads are going up as you approach summer in Florida. And then if you look down on the lower left, you'll see how daily energy consumption was changing. And in the upper right is what the daily electrical load profile looks like. That is, what time of day is the highest energy demand. And that turns out to be at around 5 p.m., which turns out to also be the time when the utility has their main peak. And we have these kinds of data on each of those individual 18 channels. Obviously, I'm not going to show you all this today, but it is available there on the website. Next slide, please. And you can learn a lot of things from this. For instance, one thing that we've learned is water heating is, even though we think of space heating and cooling as something that varies a lot seasonally, it turns out that water heating varies a lot as well in a similar fashion. This shows in the upper left how water heating changed over the entire year from January 1st, 2013 through the end of the year, and there's a 2-to-1 difference from winter to summer. And you can also see things like the Thanksgiving and Christmas in terms of how that affects the way people use hot water. But perhaps more interesting is this business of how water heating changes so much seasonally, because that has something to say for various technologies that we might consider to reduce it, like either solar water heating or heat pump water heaters. Next slide, please. So the bad news is if you're trying to say, well, I have an idea about how energy is being used in houses, then you have to be willing to embrace some complexity. This shows the average measured daily kilowatt hours per day for each end use in each house of the 60 over the entire year. And I'm not going to go over this one in detail either, but blue is cooling mainly. And you have each of the end uses. You can see On the far left is the average. In that bar where it says all, that's the average of everything. But you can see that this varies a lot from one house to the next. And so even though you can say something about the averages, you have to be willing to in a retrofit project, you may have to come up with something that's tailored that will do the best for a particular home. For instance, if you look at this slide a little carefully, you can see that for some sites, dryer energy use is really quite large. It approaches the size of water heating. Next slide, please. So this is what even if you average all those sites, here's what we saw in terms of if we had a pie chart of where energy is used in the homes, and you say, well, I've got some magic bullets, and I know how I can whack space cooling and I can whack water heating. I can knock those in half, and I can do the same for lighting. Well, this shows the problem you have with that, which was in Leah's presentation. You could also see this, where even if you really reduce the classic energy end uses of heating, cooling, and water heating, you're still left with a very large chunk of the pie that are things that you normally don't consider or that are more even difficult to get to. For instance, the conventional loads are only 45% of the total. They're less than half. And lighting and plug loads in particular may be difficult to address. So, and in dryer, look at how large the dryer was, 2.2 kilowatt hours per day, 5% of the total energy in-use loads. So anyway, some of these things that we don't generally think about in terms of energy efficiency may turn out to be really important. Next slide, please. And then this, I'm not going to go over this in detail, but this shows the timing of what that pie looks like. If you're really concerned about the peak period, then you can see what's driving that. It does look like it's being driven by cooling, which is blue. But you can also see that something like plug loads look like that they're fairly high during that time as well. Next slide, please. In the shallow retrofit measures, we collected this detailed audit data on each house, and then while we were there collecting that information, we changed all the incandescent lighting to either CFL or LED lighting. We added exterior insulation tank wraps to the hot water tank. We evaluated all the shower fixtures and measured their flow rates, and if their flow rate was greater than 2.2 GPM, we offered to change out those fixtures, and we had a whole basket of different types of fixtures that the homeowner could choose from. Same thing for lighting fixtures. And then we also tried to adjust pool pump hours because we knew that that was a major energy in use. We also looked at cleaning refrigerator coils if they were dirty because we wanted to see if that would make a difference, because there have been studies showing that perhaps it would not. So we wanted to actually look into that. And then we also wanted to look at smart power strips that would allow us to cut standby power loads that are greater than 10 watts continuous, although we found that a difficult measure to apply, and mainly because we found a lot of consumer resistance to it. Next slide, please. This just shows an example for one side of how we evaluated what happened from the shallow retrofits. This shows the measured kilowatt hours per day on the left, and you're looking at pool pump is blue, and the lighting loads are yellow, and you've got hot water, and then you've got the refrigerator. Well, anyway, you can see when the retrofit was done and that we had a pretty major impact on what happened with pool pump energy as well as lighting energy, and also we saw hot water energy go down somewhat. So we did this kind of this 30 days before and after evaluation for each site to find out what happened from the shallow retrofit, as well as another technique that we used where we looked at 1 year to the next. So next slide, please. So what did we find out from those shallow retrofits where we're collecting the audit data? We saved an average of about 9% of electricity use, or about 3.7 kilowatt hours a day. That doesn't sound like much, but if you look at that evaluated over a year, that's about 1,400 kilowatt hours, so a pretty good amount of energy savings. Let's go to the next slide, please. And this just shows the numbers, and then we had this technique where we looked at each of the energy end-use loads, and we looked at them in October 2012 before the shallows were installed, and then October 2013, and we also used this 30 days before and 30 days after technique to try to find out what our savings were, and we got very similar numbers. the savings were about 9% using the 30 days before and 30 days after, and there was some weather normalization required for that. That's described in a more detailed report. But we did find that the savings were had good longevity and they were robust. They were still present a year later. Next slide, please. And they were durable. So this just shows this example of October 2012 versus to October 2013. So you had about 4 kilowatt-hour difference from just doing these simple, very simple utility pass-through things. There was a downside to it, though, and that was because the savings were small, they were such that a homeowner could easily miss them in terms of seeing what the impact was on their month-to-month utility records. Next slide, please. And then the deeper retrofits. I'm just going to show you some quick examples. This is in Site 19, and it's showing you the daily electricity use for, in this case, for overall house power as the more efficient air conditioner and a Nest thermostat and a duct ceiling was put in, and then also a heat pump water heater later in the year, and then also a high efficiency clothes dryer. So the total consumption of this house, and this is what we consider kind of our flagship, they used more energy than just about any in the study, and we went from about 110 kilowatt hours a day, which is extraordinarily high, to about 50, and there were other retrofits that weren't done at this time. Next slide, please. And this shows just a different site, Site 40. We had a 40% savings there, and here we're looking at here's total power and then air conditioning power in the lower slide, so you can see actually what the combination of putting in the better air conditioner with the Nest thermostat and ducts did. And then for the heat pump water heater, it's quite striking. We saw very, very good savings. And when you look in the lower right, you're looking at just the water heating measured energy. And so we saw very, very good savings from that measure. Next slide, please. Site 26, another one of the deeps, started off at 74 kilowatt hours a day to about 50 and 33% savings, and you can see it illustrated again for the various in-use loads. In the top, you can see how it may be difficult to see these things individually if you're just looking at overall energy, but if you're able to look at the individual loads, it's possible to see, particularly in the case of the water heater, these reductions. And also, one of the takeaways is that the HVAC and heat pump water heater retrofits produced reliable demand reductions that we saw. Next slide, please. And I just said this, so here's the data to summarize that heat pump water heaters was a very successful measure. We put in 80-gallon models in 4-person households where we saw a 65% overall savings, 3.6 kilowatt hours per day. The 60-gallon size is 61% savings that went in smaller households. And so anyway, that measure was quite successful. And then on the right, you see the superimposed before and after graphs, 30 days pre and post on each of those retrofits. Next slide, please. One thing we looked at that was really spectacular was variable speed pool pumps. Florida has a lot of pools. About 30% of homes in the state have swimming pools, and they use an average of about 4,000 kilowatt hours a year. And we found in our study that the before circumstance was very similar to that for the pools and the Bay Deep retrofit projects. For instance, Site 7 here used 19 kilowatt hours per day pre, and then after this new variable speed pool pump was installed, 1.9 kilowatt hours per day and 90% savings, and a huge demand reduction. On the right, you can see plotted what the demand reduction was at the utility peak period. Next slide, please. We also evaluate some new technology. This is the first Energy Star clothes dryer. It's a Samsung model, and it doesn't use heat pump technology or anything like that. It just uses actually a smarter cycle in terms of the way things are being done and the way air is being moved within the dryer, and better controls. But we found that even though we evaluated them, we found that the savings weren't what we had hoped they would be. The idea was that perhaps these dryers could cut clothes drying loads by up to 30%. We didn't find that to be the case, actually. Next slide, please. So we saw, this is the best thing we saw. In the Site 19 that had the heaviest use of any site, we saw a 23% reduction. And but on average, in the 8 sites, the savings was only about 18%. So it was about half what the manufacturer had hoped it would be like. But we also had information, we learned things from this about why that was. And one of the reasons was that even with the improved controls, there was still some trouble with the moisture termination sensing in this particular unit. And then also, even perhaps more importantly, consumers were unhappy with the so-called eco-cycle that provided those savings because the clothes drying times were upwards to twice as long. Next slide, please. And so they would choose a cycle that was not the optimal one, and then it would be more like a standard clothes dryer. We had some sophisticated statistical techniques where we tried to separate out what the Nest thermostat was saving versus the rest of the HVAC package. And we put in 9 of those, and we had pretty uneven results. We saw a 19% savings, which was the best we saw in one. But overall, we saw very little savings when we tried to tease out the differences. And we also, next slide, please. We also found that one of the reasons why it may not always save is that homeowners can decide that they want to defeat it in some way by, for instance, turning on the auto away feature or setting lower temperatures in response to the fact that the Nest is trying to set the temperatures up while they're away and being unhappy about that. So anyway, one of the conclusions from this is that it may not always save, and this is a bit controversial. So we're actually installing in the Phase Heat Retrofit project, we're installing a lot more Nest and also some Lyrics, another smart thermostat, in the project in this 3rd year. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go over this in detail, but this just shows that some of the techniques that we use to try to find the differences in air conditioning use. This is measured in Site 19, the measured air conditioning consumption versus the outdoor temperature from May to October, and you can see pre versus post. We have a really nice reduction that's visible. Next slide, please. And the savings, what we saw. So in the HVAC-related package, we saw about a 37% overall savings, and lots of numbers in the more detailed report. And then you see temperature-related on the right, and that's where we were trying to find out how the Nest was affecting what the homeowner preference was like in the project. Next slide, please. So what was the final result? So an early analysis of the deep retrofits, we saw about a 34% savings overall, and that's on total. That's not just on one-end use on cooling or something like that. So it's a kind of a more difficult thing to get to. And that was, and the final savings will probably be quite a bit higher because the periods that we were evaluating here, October 2012 to January 2013, and then the similar period in the more recent year, did not include our energy-intensive summer here. And the weather was also more harsh in the post period. And not all the retrofits were complete at the end of it. So but anyway, we expect that the final savings will probably be upward to around 40%. And the pretty looking stack bars show you exactly where the savings happened. And if you look, for instance, at the pink, you can, or kind of an orange color, you can see that the heat pump water heaters really delivered a lion's share of savings along with the HVAC measures. Next slide, please. And then the slide everybody wants to know about, what does this cost? The shallow retrofits, we tracked this very carefully because we knew everyone would be interested. The average cost was about $370 per site. The hard cost was $250, and that included some upcharges in labor as well. And then, depending on the analysis technique, the savings was about 1,400 kilowatt hours, and then or about $15 per month. The rate of return was quite great, 50% or a 2-year payback. Disadvantage is these shallow retrofits are largely invisible to the consumer. It can easily be swapped by the seasonality of the loads changing from spring to summer, let's say. And the deeper retrofits, I'll call them, they're not deep in the sense of what Alea was showing before, but these certainly deeper in terms of doing more expensive things. We had 2 ways of classifying this: an outright cost, where it's just like you're going to go in and change all these things out, and that was $14.5K per site. And then an incremental cost, which would be the cost that it would have cost if you had to replace those things anyway with the cheapest other available thing versus the more efficient one that was put in. And that cost was a little less than half what the outright cost was. And then the savings were about 7,600, or estimated at about 7,600 kilowatt hours a year, or about $80 a month. And that is highly visible to the consumer. And a lot of the people involved in this project were very happy with what they were seeing. The rate of return outright was would have been about 6%, and that's the way that it was done, or 16-year payback. Incremental, about a 13% rate of return, 8-year payback. So one of the important takeaways is there's a big advantage to retrofit, energy retrofits to coincide with major equipment and appliance retrofits, replacement. So that's a really useful thing to do. Next slide, please. And so just to summarize, shallow retrofits, about a 9% savings. The deeps, probably about 40%. The shallows were highly cost-effective. The deeps would be considered cost-effective under any circumstances if you were looking at replacement at burnout. We saw a good technical potential from variable speed pool pumps, 2-speed advanced air conditioning systems, good performance there, but the install was critical. We found that we did find some problems with crew experience with getting variable speed, higher efficiency heat pumps installed properly. The heat pump water heaters were very dependable with large load reductions. The Nest thermostats, there were some surprises, and we didn't always see savings. And it looks like also that customers that really want low temperatures for air conditioning, they may compensate for them, and they may not produce savings at all. Next slide, please. The deep retrofit, again, as I mentioned, probably about a 40% reduction, a high demand reduction as well, and potentially influential results to Florida's largest utility, with the possibility that that could be pretty major if scaled up. So these are not deep in the sense of a passive house type of retrofit, but one of the things I think is encouraging from what we got from this project is it's possible to come up with things that are quite cost effective to do, both for gaining the information about doing the more expensive things, as well as doing the more expensive things themselves. And then someone that wanted to go even further, of course, that would be possible to do. And in fact, in the 3rd year of the project, we are doing that. In fact, in some of the houses we're doing D+, where we're going further. And the final thing to mention is there's a persuasive business model for retrofit services that are linked to HVAC and water heater replacement at that time. That would probably provide good opportunities for improving the cost effectiveness, and now also too from having greater buy-in from the consumer. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Danny. And our final presenter today is Brennan Leff.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Alea and Danny so far have discussed sort of specific deep retrofit projects on the West Coast and then the Southeast. And what I'm going to talk about is not so project specific and is much more an overview of deep retrofit performance across the United States. But before I proceed, I'd like to call out some threads that I think we saw consistently through Alea's presentation and Danny's, and that I'll also eventually touch on in my presentation here. The one issue with deep retrofits is that of cost effectiveness and reducing costs. We've seen how important that can be. Danny calling out how there's sort of no silver bullet solutions. We can't just target heating energy use or just hot water. These projects tend to be directed best when they're comprehensive. We've seen that occupants who are engaging in these projects have a variety of motivations that aren't just energy or cost-based, but include comfort, air quality, moisture problems, and improving health. We've also seen that there's lots of variability in performance and even in definitions of deep retrofits. We saw very aggressive projects on the West Coast, shallower projects that Danny was just presenting. Also calling out important things like the occupant impacts, defeating smart features on advanced clothes dryers, occupants interacting with Nest thermostats. These are all big threads. Next slide, please. Great. So for starters, we've seen so far that there's some variable definitions of deep retrofits. And that's something we've seen in reviewing a lot of different projects across the country, is that there's a lot of variability. In general, we'll use the definition of a deep retrofit being a comprehensive upgrade to the building enclosure, heating, cooling, and hot water equipment, and the projects often incorporate other end uses like appliance upgrades, lighting upgrades, targeting plug load reductions, potentially renewable energy systems, as well as maybe engaging occupant conservation. So in deep retrofits, there are two primary situations you can be in, one where you do not have pre-retrofit energy data, and then one where you do have pre-retrofit energy data. Now the standard definition of a deep retrofit, whether it's a 30% or 70% retrofit, is the percent reduction, but if you don't have pre-retrofit energy use, you can't always do that. So here we offer some variety of options, different ways that you could define deep retrofit projects, and they're all valid, and there's different reasons for using different ones. So we can do percent reductions, like a 50% or greater reduction, for example. You could do an absolute reduction where rather than looking at the percentage reduced, you just look at the total BTUs that have been reduced, and you could, for example, target a reduction greater than the average consumption in your zip code or in your region. If homes do not have pre-retrofit energy data, they can, of course, do simulations, which a lot of projects do for a point of comparison, but other alternatives are a consumption target, where you could target zero net energy, you could target half the regional average consumption. You could also use something like the 1,000 Home Challenge in order to come up with what a low energy use home would be in a climate zone with a certain size. And then finally, you could also define deep retrofits as performance targets. You could set a HERS goal. The projects could be seeking passive house or passive house retrofit certification, like some of the homes that Alea presented on. And alternatively, you could even just look at targeting the 2012 IECC. These are all sort of performance targets that have nothing to do with pre-retrofit data. Next slide, please. So before launching into the review that we've done, I want to touch on quickly past and present deep energy retrofit work here and abroad. So major energy retrofits, as they were called, were sort of first documented in the 1980s in North American sort of very cold climates, including Canada. Moving into milder climates, and in the 90s, the Act Squared project out here in California demonstrated actual energy savings of 50% in a very small sample of existing homes, but it showed that it was possible. More recently, we've got a number of simulation efforts that have looked across the building stock in various countries at what the technical potential was for deep energy retrofits. And we've seen that the technical potential is very high. We've had analyses done in Canada, across the European Union, and a few analyses targeting cost-optimized retrofits in the United States, including ones that Danny Parker was involved in. In terms of actual projects that have been documented in actual homes, we've got a bunch of examples from the European Union. The International Energy Agency had a task on deep energy retrofits where in 60 projects they were able to show 76% energy reductions for technical systems. The UK Super Homes project is 170 projects and counting with greater than 60% CO2 reductions. They've got a great online database. The UK Retrofit for the Future project was a project of over 100 deep retrofit projects targeting 80% CO2 reductions. They also have some fabulous data and publications and guidance available on their website. And then finally, the Enerfit is sort of the passive house community's response to the need for refurbishing existing buildings. Mostly they've been involved in multifamily projects. Next slide, please. So Lawrence Berkeley National Lab in this past year has done a review of deep energy retrofit homes in the United States, and what we've basically done, rather than going out and measuring specific homes, is we've reviewed all of the available literature that's been out there and that's been published. So for example, in Building America publications, on presentations that have been given at conferences like Affordable Comfort, magazine articles in Home Energy Magazine or the Journal of Light Construction. So we've gone out and collected all these projects, gotten all the data we can from them, and tried to compile it into one place and then perform basic analyses on it to see what savings levels are, what the projects are costing, and other sort of interesting factors like that. Now, it's worth mentioning that, of course, there are probably a lot more deep retrofit projects in the U.S. that have occurred that are undocumented and so are not included in our review. And then I also want to mention that the projects in our review are from a variety of sources. We've got, as I laid out before, magazines, online presentations, Building America reports, and these homes are including owner-occupied residences, affordable housing projects, community redevelopment based on foreclosed residences. There are also research homes, and then more broadly, green remodeling projects. Next slide, please. So in reviewing all of these projects and trying to pull them all together, we had to sort of decide what counted as deep, and as we can tell from the prior two presentations today, there's some variability. We have extremely aggressive projects that are targeting passive house, the most aggressive energy standard possible. And then others in the southeast that were taking a more moderate, lower cost approach, but still achieving good savings, 40%. So in our case, we accepted projects that self-identified as DERs. If they said they were deep energy retrofits, we accepted that they were deep energy retrofits. In general, we were looking for project scopes that were aggressive and comprehensive, targeting all of the, or nearly all of the building systems, assemblies, end uses, appliances, all of that, as I previously mentioned. And then we also, of course, the projects needed to provide some amount of data, because there's plenty of projects out there that don't tell you what their airtightness levels were. They don't tell you what their energy use was or any energy cost data. So we needed at least some of that data to be included. In terms of what performance targets the projects in our review were targeting, it was all over the place. We had some homes or some projects that were targeting specific HERS scores. They were looking for a score of HERS 70, no matter what the pre-retrofit HERS was, they wanted to get to 70. There are a lot of other projects that defined it in terms of energy reduction, so it's 30% up to 70% were sort of the published goals of the projects in our review. Others tried to meet the passive house standard, as some of the projects that Alea covered did. And then there were various deep retrofits, mostly on the sort of online case study side of things, where they were pursuing green certifications or Energy Star Plus, sort of advanced Energy Star, if you will. It's worth noting, though, that because we're just pulling all this information from published sources and it's all published by different people who have different ideas about how information should be presented, there was a lot of variability in the data that was reported, particularly in the cost data reporting. We essentially used whatever was reported in the projects, which sometimes was incremental, as Danny alluded to, and in some cases was the total cost of the energy-related measures. So the cost data is somewhat variable, and the other data is variable as well. While we reviewed something like 116 projects across the country, for any given thing we're looking at, let's say we're trying to assess the site energy reductions, we might have only had 55 or 60 projects that provided enough information for us to assess that. In some cases, for example, energy cost, it was even worse, where out of the 116 projects, we might have only gotten 30 or 40 cases where they provided that data. The final caveat here would be that our data includes both published simulated results and actual results. So there's a mix of actual usage data and simulated data. And that varies, again, by the metric. So in pre-retrofit, we had more simulated data than actual. In the post-retrofit data, we tended to have more actual usage than simulated usage. So it tended to be a variety. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here's a plot summarizing reductions in envelope airtightness, HERS index, net site energy, and energy costs. And these are all in percentages. And we can see, starting on the left, that airtightness achieved the highest reductions. The little blue diamond there is the average, and the dark black bar above it is the median. And so we had average airtightness reductions in these homes, about 50 homes, of 63%, and the median reduction was even higher than that in the 70s. And then when we look at the HERS index, or site energy and energy costs, we've got a lot of variability, which was something that Danny alluded to, which is that homes are using really widely varying amounts of energy use without particularly obvious reasons why that's occurring, other than natural variability. But in these cases, for site energy, for example, we have anything from projects that ultimately reported 10 or 12% energy reductions up to, in the case of the outlier, the sort of circle at the very top there, a net zero energy retrofitted home. But broadly speaking, across these samples, we had anywhere from about 45 up to 50% average reductions in HERS index, net site energy, and energy costs. On our bottom left, we can see the actual reductions, not percentage-based. And in air tightness, we went from an average of about 16 ACH50 down to 5 across our sample of projects. HERS, we went from an average pre-retrofit of 151 down to just about 70. On the site energy side, again, we went from something like 130, which is a bit over the national average, down to just below 50. And on costs, we went from approximately $2,700, again, just slightly above the national average, down to about $1,600. And it's also notable that the post-retrofit HERS index that we have there, 68, is just about equivalent to the HERS score that's given to newly rated homes in the U.S. So that gives us a sense of how well these deep energy reduction projects are doing. They're on par with brand new, higher performance homes. Next slide, please. So we just saw on the previous slide that our air tightness reductions were something like 63%, but here we are looking at the post-retrofit air tightness sorted from the tightest post-retrofit home, which we can see is down below 0.6 ACH50, which is the passive house level, all the way up to a post-retrofit home that was something like 17 ACH50. So massive amounts of variability, and we've got the graph coded for the homes that met certain standards. So we have a few homes that were below the passive house standard, a few homes that were below the Retrofit standard. All the homes in yellow were better than the R2000 Canadian requirement of 1.5 ACH50. We've got some homes beating the IECC 2012 requirements. And then just about half the homes were as tight or tighter than what's required in an Energy Star new home. And then we've got about half the projects that are substantially more leaky. Of course, when we're talking about air tightness, we also want to think about indoor air quality and ventilation, because when we're tightening the homes, we're reducing all the fresh air that's passing through the home and diluting pollutants, and it's possible that we could cause problems there if we're not careful. So in general, we want to pursue compliance with ASHRAE standard 62.2, which is the U.S. residential ventilation standard, not required by code in most jurisdictions. When we look across our sample of homes, we had about 70% of the deep retrofits that installed mechanical ventilation, but that was driven pretty strongly by effects in the cold climate homes, where almost all of the projects installed mechanical ventilation. If we exclude those, then less than half of the deep retrofits outside of cold climates install mechanical ventilation, which is somewhat problematic. Again, we've got homes that are being air tightened by 60 or 70%, and a good handful of those are not installing any mechanical ventilation. So that's definitely a problem. Next slide, please. So we've been talking about air tightness here. We looked at the reductions. We looked at the post-retrofit levels of air tightness. So you might be wondering, does air tightness predict energy savings? And if we look at this plot right here, we can see we've got the reduction in air tightness and percentage on the x-axis, and we've got the percent reduction in net site energy on the y-axis, and we see basically no relationship, which feels a little bit odd because we're anticipating that when we air tighten those homes, we're going to save energy, and we think that homes where we air tighten more, we would save more energy. But in these comprehensive upgrade projects, we can't use just one element like targeting really impressive air tightness performance to predict the performance of the home. There's a lot of other things going on in terms of climate zone, the size of the homes, levels of insulation, occupant behavior, as Danny was alluding to, HVAC system types. So there's a lot going on in here. That means there isn't really a very clear, across a population of homes like this, there isn't a clear relationship between air tightness and energy reduction. And if we look at other work that's been done on this, looking at a deep retrofit community in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, we see the same thing. If we look at those deep energy retrofits I was talking about in the United Kingdom, the retrofit for the future homes, we see basically the same thing. Next slide, please. But again, all of that is because of the variability in these other aspects, like the size of the home, the location. Here we're looking at a plot of pre-retrofit homes, which are the black circles, and post-retrofit homes, which are the blue triangles. And we're, again, plotting the air tightness versus the energy used. And as we can see, any of the homes that improved their air tightness also lowered their energy use. So there is, not across a population, an easy line that you can draw for a correlation, but in any given home, getting more airtight generally leads to more energy savings. So that was an interesting finding we had here. Next slide, please. Takeaways on air tightness, I would say, is that deep retrofits can be successful across a range of air tightness levels. I would say it's pretty clear that a home could be a successful deep retrofit and still be 5 or 6 or 7 ACH 50. It's entirely possible. But broadly speaking, we saw that more airtight homes lead to more energy savings, which sort of follows our physical assumptions. And furthermore, air sealing is a great thing to do because it's tends to be lower cost, has other benefits like cutting off pollutants coming from crawl spaces and attics. So we're definitely still recommending air tightening. Our specific recommendations are to basically target new construction levels more or less in line with what the International Energy Conservation Code 2012 calls for. The only thing we would add is that in gut rehabs, where either the exterior or interior sheathings are removed, it seems entirely possible for a deep retrofit to target 3 ACH 50 or less. Homes where they don't do that, we're feeling that a 5 ACH 50 or less is a good target. Alternatively, you could target a reduction, and in that case, you'd shoot for the average of the homes that we've analyzed, which is something like 60 to 70%. Next slide, please. So moving on from air tightness, I'll talk quickly about changing fuel types when we're talking about heating and increasing our use of miscellaneous electricity for a variety of purposes. So we saw some examples of this in the home in Sunnyvale that Alea presented on. It sounded like the retrofit actually increased electricity use, and I think she was attributing that to changing from gas for space conditioning to an electric heat pump, and I think there was one other thing, maybe adding cooling to the home. And consistent with that, we saw that this sort of fuel switching and electricity and gas trade-offs going on in about 7 homes in our sample. So not a ton of homes, but we saw it in 7 homes where from before the retrofit to after, they actually increased electricity use. And as I've been alluding to, a lot of that is when you have heating end uses that use gas, like domestic hot water or space conditioning, and they switch to electric, either electric resistance or heat pump technologies, we have the potential to increase electricity use. And then a lot of the deep retrofits also tend to add energy-using features. We think of these projects as just really aggressive energy reduction projects, but in fact, a lot of them add new features to the home. We tend to add extra lighting. We add mechanical ventilation. We might add mechanical cooling. We might add new audio-visual or smart home technologies. We might add dehumidification. All these things sort of offset savings that we're able to achieve elsewhere and also tend to increase our electricity usage. The problem is that when we look at source energy, which is a metric that Alea used, I think exclusively, and that's what the Building America program wants analysis to be done in, is source energy. We're looking at emissions basically at the power plant level, what amount of primary fuel did the power plant need to burn in order to deliver a unit of energy? And it turns out it's a factor of something like 3 to 1 when you compare electricity to gas. And the result is that in our 7 DRs where they increased electricity use, we had substantial sort of source energy penalties, and this would also convert to carbon emissions penalties because it tends to go in the same direction with there being much higher carbon emissions for electricity than for gas in terms of delivered usage at a home. So we went from 52% average for these 7 homes down to a 34% average reduction, and that's because of these electricity use increases. So we definitely want to watch out for that in any deep retrofit projects are the issues of fuel switching and then the issues of adding energy use, adding energy using features to the homes. These can all be sort of problematic from the societal aspect of looking at carbon emissions, but then also from the homeowner's perspective of energy cost savings. It's no surprise that electricity on a delivered energy basis tends to be substantially more expensive than natural gas. So a lot of these projects look like they're saving energy when you look at the just BTUs used, but when you look at source energy or you look at costs, they've had pretty substantial penalties. For this source energy carbon stuff, we are currently generating some guidance that will be included in the Building America Solutions Center. Sometime in the near future, we'll be looking at things like what states is it good to use a heat pump from a carbon perspective. So keep an eye out for that in the future. Next slide, please. So cost, we've been talking about cost effectiveness, cost, and whatnot in the Alea and Danny's presentations. So what did we see across our sample of homes, 60 homes that reported project cost? We saw an average of just about $40,000. And we see, again, lots of variability. The plus or minus on that is something like $30,000. So projects typically ranged anywhere from $10,000 up to $70,000, so lots of variability. On a per square foot basis, it's, again, about $22 a square foot, plus or minus something like $18 a square foot. So again, variability reigns supreme throughout this discussion. Our figure on the bottom, though, compares, what we just said is the typical cost for a deep retrofit, which is about $40,000, against what Americans are otherwise spending on remodeling in their homes. And it turns out that $40,000 for a deep retrofit, while it sounds like and is a lot of money, is certainly in line with what a lot of Americans are spending in their home on an annual basis. So when we look at typical U.S. remodels, the average mid-range remodeling project from Remodeling Magazine in 2012 and 2013 was just shy of that $40,000 level. If we look at the sort of 500,000 homes per year that are doing the most expensive remodels, we see that their average is just shy of $100,000. So deep retrofits seem like they could be cost prohibitive, and we're very scared of that, but they are very much in line with what Americans are otherwise spending on remodeling and on improvements in their homes. Our goal is to get some of that money that's being spent already redirected in the energy efficiency direction and redirected into deep energy retrofit measures, similar to what Danny was alluding to, where you would time retrofits to coincide with other improvements that are going on in the home. So timing it with HVAC replacement, timing it with water heater replacement, timing it with re-siding so you could add exterior insulation depending on your climate. Next slide, please. So we'll move on quickly to talk about cost effectiveness. In cost effectiveness, we're looking basically at cash flow. If you finance the retrofit using a 30-year loan at something like 4.7%, which I think was the 5-year preceding average, and then we look at the balance between the monthly energy bill savings versus the monthly increase in loan costs. Next slide, please. And this figure here basically shows us the balance between those. The green homes are ones that saved money on a monthly basis, and the red homes are ones that increased their energy costs on a month, or increased their net home ownership costs on a monthly basis. So the good news is that on average across these deep retrofit projects, we see that the median change is $1 a month increase. So that's great. If we can get deep retrofit projects that are financed and only cost the homeowner a net $1 a month or $15 a month, as you see from the average, we would say that's an unqualified success. That's fantastic. But as you'll see, there's a lot of variability. We had some homes that saved $50 or more than $100 a month, and we have other homes that increased their energy costs by more than $150 or more than $200 a month. So if we look really quickly at what was going on the sort of extreme good ends where they were saving a lot more money, and then on the bad ends where they were increasing their costs a lot more, we can pull out some ways at reducing project costs and increasing cost effectiveness. So it shouldn't come as any surprise when we look at the most successful in terms of cost effectiveness deep retrofits, the pre-retrofit conditions tended to be very poor and entirely uninsulated. So these were the homes that had the biggest potential. They would, if we modeled them, we would expect they had the most energy use. So these were big potential homes, and they were more cost effective, which is not too surprising. We also had some interesting cases where you had the vast majority of energy use going into heating, for example, with an expensive fuel like diesel. It's a diesel boiler. And so in that case, targeting really aggressive heating energy reductions lets you chop away at a massive amount of energy costs for the homeowners. And it also allowed you to not invest in all of the other end uses, and as a result, they had a more cost-effective project. The other thing we saw just on the effective or on the successful projects was that their energy bill reductions were larger than average, again, sort of pointing to the success that was gained in targeting high-usage homes. On the homes on the other side, where they substantially increased their net monthly costs, we also saw some patterns or some interesting things. You tended to see that the homes that increased monthly costs a lot were very aggressive, super insulated projects. Most of them were in cold climates in the Northeast. So these were projects where absolutely everything was being redone. They were adding 4, 5, or 6 inches of exterior foam insulation. They were air sealing from 30 ACH50 down to 1.5 ACH50. Everything was done super aggressive, and these tended to not be very cost-effective projects. But that's because they were connected with low pre-retrofit energy costs. So you had sort of very aggressive projects occurring in homes that were already low users, that already had low energy use, and so there really wasn't anywhere for them to go. There was a limit to how much energy costs they could save, and as a result, they increased their net monthly homeownership costs. Consistent with this, the pre-retrofit conditions often included some amounts of insulation. They were homes that already had double pane windows. Again, they were not sort of the prime opportunity homes that were entirely uninsulated and had leaky single pane windows. You tended to see increased electricity use. We saw retrofits that didn't address all end uses. So those are just some of the issues we saw. Next slide, please. So I'll finish the main part of the talk here talking about value. We've just looked at the cost effectiveness. We've seen that on average, the projects can be cost effective, which is fantastic. We've also seen that some projects do, really poorly in terms of net monthly costs. But that assumes that we're only looking at the sort of economic benefit of dollars spent and dollars saved. And that is just simply not how most homeowners who are engaging in deep retrofits think about it. They tend to value things like comfort improvements, reductions in noise, improvements in moisture, health, indoor air quality. So those are all the things we're used to thinking of in non-energy benefits. But then even potentially more important than that are increased home value and reduced maintenance and durability. So when we're looking at increases in home value, we should remember that when they're investing in deep energy retrofit projects, some of that is going to be capitalized into their home value, so that might just cut down on costs and make the projects much more cost effective right off the bat. And then of course there's also carbon emissions. And what I would say is pretty clear from reviews of past energy retrofit projects across the US and across time is that you get homeowners engaged to do projects based on these indoor environmental quality, home value, durability sort of pushes much more so than the economics of dollars in and dollars out. Next slide, please. So I think I need to move fairly quickly here. This is just a quick summary. On average, we had something like 47% reductions in energy use with a minority of the projects, 16%, doing 70% or more savings. So some really successful homes. The reductions, the actual BTU reductions in the deep retrofits were approximately equal to the usage of an average US home. So that was very impressive. In terms of PERS scores, we tended to get down around 68. In terms of air tightness, half of the projects did basically Energy Star or better, and we had average reductions right around 60%. We had the one issue of mechanical ventilation not being consistently provided, and we definitely recommend that projects pay much more close attention to that in the future. In terms of energy costs annually, the average deep retrofit in our study saved $1,300 a year. The average project cost $40,000 a year. And when financed, using a sort of traditional home loan, the deep retrofit costs can be cost neutral. Again, we've identified some cases where that's not necessarily the case. And then there's this massive potential value for deep retrofits in the non-energy benefits of comfort, health, indoor air quality, etc. Next slide, please. So I'll close with some basic guidance for deep retrofits wherever they're occurring. One is to comprehensively address all building systems and all end uses, not just targeting only heating, not targeting only hot water, so comprehensive, and planning projects with occupant involvement where feasible. It's very clear that the occupants make a big difference on energy use before and after and what the reductions look like. So we want to plan with the occupants in mind. We want to use simple designs and off-the-shelf equipment and be extremely wary of custom engineered, custom systems that look like they're going to have fantastic performance on paper, but can lead to some issues later down the line, particularly with maintenance and service. In general, we want to select lower cost options. If we want to make our retrofits cost effective, we need to select the lower cost options that are going to produce roughly equivalent or adequate performance. So that might mean using a ductless mini split versus a ground source heat pump. That might mean using dense packed cellulose as opposed to always using spray polyurethane foam. It might mean using an efficient gas water heater for domestic hot water and not installing a really expensive solar combi system. So we need to sort of, not always invest in the most expensive equipment thinking it's going to provide silver bullet solutions. Really important is using skilled contractors and subs wherever possible. Numerous research reports that we reviewed on deep retrofits just repeatedly called out this problem of inexperienced contractors, subs, and equipment suppliers just repeatedly being a barrier to successful projects. As Danny said, we want to target existing projects and equipment replacement so that the retrofits can be justified as an incremental cost rather than a total out-of-pocket cost. Next slide, please. And we're almost done here. In air-tightened homes, which are basically all deep retrofits from what we can tell, we need to provide adequate ventilation using ASHRAE standard 62-2013. It's just a basic practice of providing acceptable indoor air quality. In the standard, you can assess air tightness and whether or not a fan is even required. And in a lot of the leakier homes, you will not need to install a fan, and you will have still complied with the standard. So absolutely, the ventilation can be very important. We talked about the source energy and carbon sort of societal impacts, and how site energy might not always be the answer. So again, if we're looking at societal impacts, or you want to impact global climate change, we need to look at source energy. We need to look at carbon emissions. For the occupants, you probably still want to stick with talking to them about site energy and about energy bill costs, because the carbon might be understandable, but source energy tends to be sort of confusing for occupants, and it's not what they see on their monthly energy bill. This sort of site source carbon thing, it's most important when you're changing the fuel mix or adding end uses, potentially increasing electricity use. If you're not doing any of those things, then that assessment's a lot less important. As I said, the non-energy benefits drive occupant decisions to invest in these, so that's what you want to market towards. And then lastly, I'll end by saying you want to consider staged retrofits, which are integrated with maintenance and equipment replacement. These could be less costly, less disruptive than a whole house remodel. And they also have the potential to sort of introduce occupants to the benefits of energy retrofits over time, which engages them further in the process. So thank you for your attention today.
Thank you to the panelists for those outstanding presentations. We have time now for a few questions. We already have some great questions from the audience, and if you have questions that we don't have time to answer today, please contact the speakers directly. The email addresses are shown here. The first question is directed to Alea. Please provide more information on the modeling software that was used in California.
Yeah, hi, good question. So most of the comparisons, I made a few comparisons in my presentation to modeling software, and that was primarily to BOPT, which is software developed by NREL for the Building America program. We do use, for compliance purposes, Energy Pro modeling software here. We didn't really do much comparison to that because there's a number of limitations in that software, particularly with modeling some of these technologies. In one of the projects in the Sunnyvale, we also did a comparison to the passive house planning package and compared both actual energy use post-retrofit to the PHPP as well as to BOPT, and found that while the PHPP along with BOPT both did not come up with exactly the right number, the PHPP did a much better job, particularly in identifying what your critical loads are in heating versus cooling. So it identified heating as the more predominant load in that building with much lower cooling energy, where we saw exactly the opposite in BOPT.
Okay, great. And then also there was another question for Alea. Can you provide more information on the distribution fan for the Sunnyvale house?
Yeah, sure. So it was actually just a Panasonic exhaust fan similar to what you'd install in a bathroom, and it's running at somewhere between 90 and 100 CFM and has a pretty low fan efficacy in the 0.1, 0.15 watts per CFM range.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for Danny. Regarding the shallow retrofit measures, was there any analysis of why the refrigeration loads between individual houses varied so much?
Yes, we did look at that, and a lot of that, the cooling varied a lot because of set point was primary factor. But similar to what Brennan showed, we also looked at the measured air tightness of the houses and a variety of other factors. And we did find that the air tightness mattered not only for heating but for cooling. But we also found that the appliance energy mattered a lot, second only to the thermostat setting. And we saw about a 10% increase for each degree Fahrenheit lower that the house was maintained. But we found that the measured appliance energy use inside the house was a huge factor in terms of air conditioning needs, because the heat being produced by the appliances has to ultimately be removed. And so some of the houses had like home offices or multiple computers and things like this. And so they had elevated cooling needs because of this. But we also found there were other factors too. For instance, even something like the roof color, the insulation level mattered less. Didn't matter for heating, didn't matter as much for cooling, but roof color didn't matter for cooling.
And then also, Danny, there was a question about heat pump water heaters. Did the heat pump water heater savings account for the secondary impacts on HVAC loads?
They did not. Well, they did implicitly, because but most of these were located in garages and not in the interior. And one thing to mention is in the third year of the project, we're actually installing some of these with plant that are going to be ducted so that they're actually planned to interact with the space, so that you provide some cooling when the thermostat's in a cooling position during the summertime. So we hope to take advantage of that, but that's a good question.
And then the third question for Danny was, what DAQ hardware did you use for such intensive monitoring?
I think it's called EMON, the energy monitor. So we used that, and then we used, and that's hooked up over the internet, and then we also used a dedicated, I think it's 0.6 is the, we're using that to collect temperature and relative humidity data, and then we used, because that was so critical, we're using deployed hobos as a backup for that. And again, in the third year of the project, we're doing some other things. We're looking at centrally located mini-split heat pumps, and there we're going to be looking at temperatures that are monitored in each room, so we know something more about the issue that Alea brought up in her presentation, which is, what is the distribution going to be like for something like that.
Okay. Thank you. And there's one question here for Brennan. Do you have any suggestions for good site and source energy assessments?
Not entirely sure what that means, but some simulation software, if you're using BOPT, for example, will do source energy calculations. You can actually put in carbon values as well, so that will sort of do built-in carbon or source energy assessment. Alternative, sort of pre-existing alternatives to that there are none that I'm aware of. The basics are you use total electricity use multiplied by approximately 3. We use 3.16. In gas, you give just a little bump to, you multiply gas usage by 1.02, I think. So that's one way to do it. Again, we're going to be providing some guidance on the Building America Solutions Center that'll look at things like state-by-state variability in terms of CO2 emissions per delivered kilowatt hour of electricity. And then we'll talk about things like in which states are there heat pumps currently available on the market that can even break even on a carbon basis with a high-efficiency gas burner, for example. So I don't have anything more than that, unfortunately.
Okay, that's all the time we have for questions today. Thank you, panelists and audience participants. Now we'd like to ask our audience to answer 3 short questions about today's webinar. Your feedback will help us to know what we are doing well and where we can improve. Heather, will you please display the first question? And if you could go ahead and answer, audience members. Okay, and then the second question. And then the final question. Thank you for answering our survey. Stay tuned for the next Building America webinar, which will be on July 16th at 3 p.m. Eastern. This webinar will focus on improving the performance of central space conditioning systems in multifamily buildings and will be presented by the Building America team, Advanced Residential Integrated Energy Solutions. On behalf of the Building America program, I'd like to thank all of our expert panelists for their time today and to our attendees for participating in today's webinar. We've had a terrific audience and we very much appreciate your time. Please visit the Building America website to download a copy of the slides and learn more about the program. We also invite you to inform your colleagues about Building America resources and services. Have a great rest of your day and we hope to see you again at future Building America events. This concludes our webinar.